I never imagined that a simple knock at the door would begin a story that would change the entire course of my life. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon, and I had just finished cleaning the kitchen when I received a text from my son, Daniel. He was stuck at work and couldn't make it to our family dinner that evening. "But don't worry, Mom," the message read. "Jake will come pick you up instead." Jake, his best friend since middle school. I hadn't seen him in months, not since they both graduated college. Back then, he was the lanky, shy boy who used to eat cereal on my couch and call me ma'am with a sheepish grin. When I opened the door, I was startled. Standing there wasn't a boy at all, but a man, tall, confident, and surprisingly mature. His eyes held a warmth I didn't expect, and for a moment, I felt the years roll off my shoulders. "Hey, Mrs. Allen," he said, his voice deeper than I remembered. "Daniel asked me to make sure you got to the restaurant safely." I smiled and grabbed my coat, brushing off the strange flutter in my chest. The car ride was filled with laughter and stories from the past. We spoke about everything: his new job, my recent promotion, the way Daniel still hadn't learned how to do his own laundry. But then, somewhere between the traffic lights and soft music playing on the radio, the tone shifted. Jake looked at me, not with the fondness of a boy who admired his friend's mother, but with something deeper, something that made me feel like I wasn't just someone's mom, but a woman, seen, heard, and appreciated. What happened that night wasn't planned, but it wasn't wrong either. Over dinner, over wine, over the hours we spent talking long after the restaurant closed, I realized that sometimes life has a way of bringing people together in the most unexpected of ways. And what began as a favor turned into a connection neither of us could ignore. We sat in his car for a few minutes after dinner, reluctant to part ways. The city lights danced on the windshield, and the gentle rhythm of rain added a strange sort of intimacy to the moment. I could feel the shift in the air between us, unspoken, undeniable. Jake turned to me, his hands still resting on the steering wheel, and for a long moment, he just looked at me. Not in a way that made me uncomfortable, but like he was trying to see something I had long forgotten about myself. "You look happy tonight," he said quietly. I laughed gently, caught off guard. "Do I? Maybe it's the wine, or maybe it's just nice talking to someone who doesn't see me as just Daniel's mom." His smile was soft. "I've never seen you like that. To me, you've always been more than that." There it was, that subtle but unmistakable tension rising to the surface. I should have said something to defuse it, redirected the conversation. But instead, I asked, "More than that? What do you mean?" The next few days passed in a blur, but Jake never strayed far from my thoughts. I told myself it was silly, that I was reading too much into a few heartfelt words and the warmth of his hand around mine. But my heart knew better. There had been something real in that moment, something that wasn't just passing kindness. He had looked at me like a man sees a woman, not a boy seeing a mother figure. And I had responded, not out of loneliness or curiosity, but because a part of me had been waiting for someone to see me like that again. Daniel called later that week. His voice was rushed, distracted like always. "Hey, Mom. Jake told me you two had dinner. Thanks for going. He said it was nice catching up." "Yeah," I said, trying to sound casual. "It was nice." "Good. He's a great guy, huh? Always reliable. Wish I had his life together." Daniel chuckled. I smiled faintly. If only he knew what I was thinking. If only he could sense the storm that had been quietly brewing in my chest since that night. I changed the subject quickly, feeling the guilt creep in, though nothing had even happened yet. But yet was a word that carried weight. And fate, as always, had its own plans. That weekend, I received another message. This time from Jake. "Hey. I know this might be a little bold, but would you like to grab coffee sometime? Just us?" No Daniel, no expectations. Just two people catching up properly. I stared at the message for a long time. I could have said no. I could have pretended the other night was a fleeting moment of weakness. But the truth was I didn't want to. My fingers trembled slightly as I typed back. "I'd like that. Let me know when and where." We met at a quiet little cafe tucked into a side street downtown. It was the kind of place where people didn't rush, where the conversations were soft and the smiles lingered longer. Jake was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window with 2 cups of coffee and that same steady presence I remembered from the car. "You came," he said, standing as I approached. "Of course I did," I replied, taking the seat across from him. Our conversation flowed effortlessly again, but this time it was different, deeper. We talked about our lives, our regrets, the things we never said out loud to anyone else. He told me about his strained relationship with his father. I told him how lonely the house had felt since Daniel moved out. We weren't just bridging an age gap. We were building a bridge between 2 people who had quietly needed someone for a long time. At one point, as I laughed at something he said, he reached out and brushed a stray strand of hair behind my ear. The gesture was tender, almost reverent. "I've wanted to do that since the other night," he admitted, his voice low. I looked at him, then really looked. And for the first time, I felt to fully acknowledge what I was feeling. I wasn't falling for a boy. I was discovering a connection with a man who had grown into someone patient, kind, and fiercely attentive. Someone who made me feel not just wanted, but truly valued. He hesitated, then shrugged. "I always admired you. Not just as someone who took care of us when we were kids, but the way you carry yourself. The strength. The way you see people. You listen. You care." That always stuck with me. His words stirred something inside me I hadn't felt in years, like a locked door being nudged open. I had spent so long in the role of a mother, a professional, a caretaker, that I'd nearly forgotten what it was like to feel like a woman. Like someone who could be admired, not just relied upon. We sat there in silence for a moment, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. And then, almost instinctively, I placed my hand gently over his. It was a small gesture, but it felt enormous. He looked down, surprised, then turned his hand over and held mine. His grip was warm, steady, and it made my heart race. "I don't know what this is," I whispered, "but it's been a long time since I felt seen." Jake leaned in slightly, his voice barely audible. "Maybe that's all you needed." I didn't kiss him that night. Neither did he try. But the seed had been planted, and both of us knew that something had shifted, irrevocably. That evening, after he dropped me off at home, I stood by the window for hours, watching the rain fall and thinking about what just happened. I knew the world wouldn't understand. How could they? A woman my age, feeling this way about someone younger, someone connected to my son. It felt forbidden. It felt complicated. But more than anything, it felt real. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was confused, but because for the first time in years, I felt alive. And that frightened me just as much as it thrilled me.